Okay, hi everyone. We're gonna start a second Battlefront 2 modding tutorial here. In this tutorial, I'm gonna go over some of the more advanced functions in map editing. So in the previous tutorial, we talked about some of the basic functions of ZeroEditor, which is the world editor for Star Wars Battlefront 2 mod tools. We learned how to play with the settings of command posts, and how to set up barriers, place basic objects, and modify the terrain. So in this one we'll go over some of the more advanced, very useful tools that you can use to really start getting into great levels of detail with your worlds. So to start off, I'll open the editor. Here it is. And just before I get too far here, you may notice it's kind of a small window that comes up here, and that's actually pretty easily fixed. I'm just going to close it again, and you'll notice in the same directory there's a config ini file. If you just open that up in your text editor, there's a whole bunch of different settings that'll come up here, and you can simply change window width from 1024 to something else. I like to do 1600, and then window height 900. You can change it so that it'll maximize or that it'll be full screen. I prefer not to personally, but you can do whatever you'd like there. One thing that you do want to keep the same is flip model X. Otherwise you will start to get some very strange results. What that does is that it takes the objects that you place and it flips them backwards on the x-axis, which sounds like a bad thing, but it actually is a good thing, because I'm pretty sure how it works is the editor flips them backwards when you load them in, something along those lines anyway. You'll just have fewer problems if you keep this set to 1. Alright, we'll save that file, and now if we open up ZeroEditor, much better. Alright, so let's load up our example world. I've got ABC right there. Alright. So you may remember last time we made some very basic changes to the world. We added a couple of hills, one here, and some rocks. And then the other change that we made was to modify the settings of 2 of the command posts so that they would start off as neutral command posts instead of belonging to the Republic or Empire or the CIS or Rebels. Okay. So one thing you may notice is that the map is pretty dark. The first thing we'll talk about is lighting, because that's a pretty simple aspect of the map to change. It's very easy to change the lighting in the ZeroEditor. So you'll see here we've got the light tab at the very end of the edit toolbar. If I click that, it brings up some settings for us. So this here is where we would see a list of lights that we've placed in the game. Right now there are none, so it's just default lighting, which is why it's kind of dim and not very nice to look at. If we want to create a new light, we would press place. So I'll do that right now. And at my cursor you can kind of see, I'll zoom in a little bit here, you can see this light prop that I can place. So I'm just going to put that right there, and we'll go back to select mode so that I'm not placing more lights, but I can click on this light and you'll see that it highlights. So as I click that, you'll notice the name comes up here. This shows that I've selected light 1, and maybe I'll rename it. I'll make it Spotlight-1. Right underneath that you can see the property type, which defines what kind of light this is. Now there are 3 kinds of lights that you can place in the editor. There's also another kind of light that I will go over briefly a little later and then look at in a little more detail in another tutorial. So the three kinds here are spotlight, omni-light, and directional light. So spotlight is as it sounds. It's a directed light. It shines in a certain direction from a point and covers a cone-shaped area. Omni-lights, I'll click it here so you can see what it does. Okay, an omni-light essentially is an omnidirectional light. It shines in all directions from a given point. So it'll emanate or radiate outwards in a sphere from that point in the center there. And the third type is directional light. And you can see when I click that, the side of that hill lights up. And if we actually move over here, we can see the side of this hill lights up as well. The placement of a directional light doesn't matter in the world. You can place it wherever. It's the rotation that matters. And I'll talk about that a little more later. So let's just change this back to a spotlight for now. And you can see that nothing's really lighting up at this point because the spotlight is limited by where you place it and what its range is and what its angle is. Right now you can see it's very small. The range is set to 5, so it's basically a light that will stop shining after 5 meters. And then you can see down here as well the properties, cone angles, inner and outer. So the inner cone is a 45-degree angle. And one thing that I realized I forgot to go over in the previous tutorial is how to actually move stuff around. You can read this in the documentation for the Battlefront II mod tools, but I'll just quickly tell you how. It's a bit embarrassing that I didn't mention that last tutorial as I was moving these rocks around. So to move an object, you would hold the C key while the object is selected, and you can see as I'm holding that key down, 3 axes come up. So there's the x-axis here, that's the red, and y-axis, blue, and the Z or Z axis, which would be the green one here. It's a bit strange because in most editors the green axis is Y, the vertical axis. Now to move along these axes, that's controlled by the mouse. So if I hold that down and hold left click, you can see the red x-axis is highlighted, and I can slide this around on that axis very easily just by moving the mouse with the left button held. And the same goes for the other axes. Now the control for the z-axis, z-axis, is right click. So if I hold right click while C is held down, I can slide this light along that axis. And then to move it vertically, that is the middle click button. So I'm holding C and I'm holding middle click, and I can slide it up and down. And you can actually hold down multiple mouse buttons at the same time. So I'm going to hold down both left and right, and you can see both those axes are highlighted, and a white plane comes up as well, showing what plane I'm moving the object in. So I'm just holding both right now. I can slide it around. Maybe I'll do vertical and z-axis, and you can see again that plane pops up. Alright. And I've lost it. Okay, there it is. Let's just move it back up. There we go. Alright, so let's do something with this. Maybe we'll move it over to one of the command posts. Let's move it over here. Now, range of 5 is not very much at all, so I'm going to just change that to, let's make it 20. So the range has been increased greatly, as you can see. And let's make the outer cone angle maybe 70 degrees. You can see that that outer cone, which is a little fainter than the inner cone, has expanded. And the outer cone differs from the inner cone in that the inner cone, the light is going to be 100% intense inside there, and outside of that it's going to start falling off and becoming less bright. Let's make the inner cone angle 55 degrees. You can see that's expanded. Okay, and for spotlights there's also this other option underneath called bidirectional, and if I click that you can see it shines out in the other direction. So that could be useful for some purposes, I'm sure. I've never had to use it for anything, but I know that there are people who have used it. It basically just shines the light out in the opposite direction as well. I'm just going to keep it as one directional for now. Okay, so we've got our light in position, but it's still shining just off to that side. To rotate, and this is another thing I should have touched on in the previous tutorial, we have two options. There's the X key, which rotates the object around its center, and then the Z key, which is only for rotating objects. It doesn't work for lights, but that'll rotate the object on a global axis, and you can read a little bit more about that in the documentation for ZeroEditor. So for now we just use the X key, and the same principle applies. Left click for the X rotation axis, right click for Z, and middle click for this axis here. So you can see I've rotated it so that it faces kind of downwards, and I'll move it down, and you can see as I move it down that the lighting starts to be applied to the terrain. Now in the editor it doesn't look so great, because how the editor works is it just does some quick calculations, and as you may have guessed from how the terrain editing works, the ZeroEditor terrain is generated based on basically a mesh, and it's a fairly low resolution mesh. Basically every few meters is another point on that mesh. So as you can see, as I'm moving it up and down, these large chunks of terrain are becoming lit or unlit. Yes, we'll just put it here, and I'm not quite happy with that rotation. Let's make it face that way and just move it over a little bit towards that rock. You can see the rock's getting lit up as well. Just a rough approximation of how it would be lit up in game. Yeah. Sometimes I lose lights. If you're not careful when you're moving a light or an object and you're kind of clicking around while trying to move it, you will find that it likes to run away from you. So I'm just going to quickly bring it back here by deleting it and just placing a new one, because I'm too lazy to go hunting for it. Let's rename it Spotlight 1 and range 20, 55, 75. Select. Okay, and I'll just rotate it back to this angle. Okay, good. There we go, we've got a spotlight now. And I'm not going to touch that anymore. Now there's a few other settings, well there's quite a few actually on the way that I didn't look at, but we can look at those now. So there's the cast shadows option, which should be pretty self-explanatory. If I click yes, then units such as, well, your Republic trooper, stormtroopers, battle droids, will cast shadows, and that's pretty much it. They'll cast shadows on the terrain. Very simple. Static, means that it can't be changed or modified during the game. Texture we don't need to worry about too much right now. That might be something for a more advanced tutorial. And this clamp or wrap option here applies to the texture field. Color, pretty self-explanatory. In fact, let's go ahead and change the color now. Right now it's just a white light. Let's make it something a little more interesting. Let's make it pink, because we can. And now you can see the rays coming out of it are in pink, and the terrain and object now show a pink hue. Cast specular, that's a pretty good one to turn on, because what that'll do is allow units and objects that have specular maps to actually work with this light. So what the specular will do is, when you see a shiny object and you know how it has that almost glow to a certain part of it, or reflection, or very bright patches on it, that's what specular is. So you'll probably see a very light pink specular on those kinds of objects or units. And then PS2 overbright we really don't need to tinker with at all, so we just leave that as no. Alright, so we've got a spotlight in the game engine. Let's place another light, and I'll just put it right here. I'll select it, and okay, we'll name it Omni Light 1, and change it to, you may have guessed, Omni. Let's turn on cast shadows, cast specular, and again we've got a very small radius to start off, so let's change that to maybe 35. Nice big light, and move it up. Now the rotation really doesn't matter for the Omni light, because again it's a sphere of light. Let's put it right there. So we've got a nice big area that's being lit right now. Okay, and let's pick a color for it. Maybe sort of a teal color, maybe, or turquoise, aqua, I don't know. There. Alright. Just a side note, which you may be aware of already, if you move the luminosity down on the light, like so, then the light becomes a lot more dim. So if you're looking for just a very, very soft, dim light, you just want to move that down. Okay, but I want mine around there just so it's nice and obvious. Alright, so I'm just going to leave those in, and we'll maybe come back to do a directional light another time. You can also turn on and off real lighting if you just want to be able to see objects and not worry about what the lighting looks like. Then that's the setting you want. Okay, I want to see that though. Alright. So now let's look at something that's I did mention briefly in the last tutorial, and that's planning. In the previous tutorial I went over barriers, and as you can see here we have a number of those just to kind of block in our battlefield. In fact, I'll quickly add a few more. You can move barriers easily just by dragging them around. And I'll just block this all in like that. So now our battlefield is 100% contained. The units will not travel outside of this area. Now, keep in mind, this is only for AI. Players are not at all prohibited from traveling outside of this area. This is only for the AI, so they don't look stupid or don't try to run away from the battlefield. So yeah, we touched on this. Now we'll look at planning. what I'm going to do for the planning section of the tutorial is I'm actually just going to save and close ZeroEditor, because I want to add some new props in that'll help to demonstrate how planning works. So I'm just going to go to Data ABC, Worlds, ABC, and we've already got our mesh and ODF folders here for objects. I've got a couple, or rather just one object here on my desktop that I've used in other test maps of mine. I'm just going to copy the mesh and Targa files in to the mesh folder and CPC building full wall ODF file into the ODF folder. Just to show you that there's nothing special about this is again just a prop with a geometry name. So it's completely static, doesn't do anything special at all. And the mesh is just this with a concrete texture. It's just a very basic wall, very simple. So if I go back to the Data ABC folder, now that I've got those there, and head back into ZeroEditor, load up the map. That's a bit strange. The lights are obviously still the correct colors, but they don't show correctly on the terrain anymore. It's a bit odd. Okay, so let's go to the Object tab, get my regions up again, and maybe just my barriers. Now, in the Show section here, just because I can see regions and barriers doesn't mean that I'm able to edit them. They're just there so I can see the area that I'm working with. You can even turn objects off if you want, so you can't see any objects, just terrain. Alright. So let's browse for an ODF file. Let's go to ABC, ODF, and let's get the full wall in there and place. So just to zoom in, like I said, a very simple object. It's about 2 meters high and roughly, I believe, 8 to 10 meters long. It's just a little something that I made to help test example maps that I have made in the past. Let's add a few of these around the 2 neutral command posts. This will give us a chance to practice rotating and moving objects around as well, because as you can see, they all, when they're initially placed, they are all facing the same direction, which is not going to work for us. Place a few more. I'll come back to that side a little later. Okay, so for now, I'm just going to try and build. I'm going to turn my light off. There we go. I'm just going to build pretty much a little, almost a hallway that leads to, I don't want grid on, so I'm going to turn the snap to grid setting here off, so I can just move this around freely now. So we're going to make a corridor almost that leads to the command post that units have to walk down, and it's not going to be straight. It's going to have some obstacles and some twists like this, just to make it a little challenging for them to get in. And I'm not modifying the z-axis at all here. You know, it doesn't look all that great, but there, that one I did modify the z-axis because it was floating in the middle of the air. some more of these, so it's simple enough just to place, and it's going to try and place the last object you selected. So if I selected maybe one of these rocks, and like that one there, I clicked it, and maybe I was placing rocks, moving them around, and then I go place, it's going to select that kind of rock, but I don't want that. I'm going to select the wall type. So it's easy to add various numbers of the same kind of prop over and over and over again, rather than having to go back and select the ODF file. And I'll just quickly rotate that into place. Let's make that go right there. Make this pretty narrow. Whoop. Just make sure nothing's floating here, because object collision is by default not very realistic, not very well calculated inside the editor. You can change that when you load the map. Maybe next time I load, I will show you how to do that. Okay, we've still got too much of a straight line that they can travel through here, so I'm gonna change that a bit. Break things up. That's a little too narrow. Okay. Alright, I like that better. Let's just move that over. Much better. In fact, let's... There we go. I just want to be able to demonstrate how smart the AI can look if you give them the proper instructions. So now we've got this really, really narrow winding corridor that leads to the command post. So we could actually tackle this if we really wanted to, and we might have to supplement it with this, but we could just use barriers and place very careful barriers along the walls here. And if we surround this command post with barriers and just leave the one entrance here, the AI will be intelligent enough to figure out, hang on a sec, I can't get in this way or this way or this way. I need to go through the entrance and just follow that to the command post. And that's, you know, that's a pretty good way of doing it if you want to spend the time on the barriers. Now, like I said, we'll probably have to add some barriers just to help them out a little bit. Using a clever combination of barriers and planning is probably one of the best ways to make the AI look a little more intelligent in game. Okay, so let's get started with that. So I'm going to click the Planning tab. And there's not a whole lot that needs to be changed in these settings most of the time. It starts us off with the new hub action. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to make a new hub. And to do that, I just click anywhere and then move my mouse. And as I move the mouse, the hub will get larger or smaller. I'm just going to make it very small here because we have a very small area. Now, how the hubs work is these define the width of that point, I guess, what area the AI is going to try and occupy. And this will make a lot more sense once I explain connections. But for now, I'll place another hub. I'll put it right there, and we'll make it quite narrow as well. So now that I have two hubs, I'm going to make something called a connection. So I'm going to go up here to Actions and go New Connection. And you'll see all these filters come up. I will explain these right now, so there's no confusion. All of these are selected by default. And what this list does is it enables you to, say, disable small, medium, and huge unit types, because by default, when these are all selected, every type of unit or vehicle will try to follow these hubs when they're connected. If I was to disable hover, small, medium, huge, and flyer, then only the soldier AI type, so just your basic units, such as clone troopers and battle droids, would try to follow the planning hubs. If I was to disable soldier, let's maybe re-enable hover and small, then hover vehicles and small vehicles, so like your speeder bikes, would be the only ones to follow these hubs. So you could make specific routes for vehicles to follow. You can also make them one way, or you can make them jump so that the units will know to jump across, or jet jump, so maybe jet troopers or dark troopers can leap across maybe a ravine that other units wouldn't be able to. For now, I'm just going to turn all these on because we don't really care too much about that. So to create a connection, I click one of the hubs, doesn't matter which one, and then I just move my mouse over to the other hub and click again, and you can see that this rectangle has been created that draws a line between these points. Now, they look a lot like barriers, which can be visually confusing at times, but you can always tell what a connection is just by looking at the hubs. Alright, so we've got this connection. It is two-way by default with it selected. If I edit connection and click it, I can click one way, and you can see that it makes it one way, only the direction that you created it. So if I was to have clicked this hub first and then moved the connection over to the second hub, then when I clicked one way, it would have had the arrow pointing to the left. And that's useful for some things. We don't really need to worry about it now. We do want them to be able to come back out of the maze after they've gone through it, so I'm going to keep it as two-way hub. So let's continue the path, and I'll make another hub here. Here, it's getting pretty narrow in there, so I'll make this one very small, and another small one right here. Slightly larger one there. And I'll make a few in here, and I'll explain why I'm doing that in just a sec, as opposed to making one big one that covers the command post. And we'll just make a new connection. Connect, 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 connect. And then what I'm going to do in here is interconnect these three. And again, I'll explain that in just a moment, because I do want to do some things out here as well. We'll make a couple new hubs, make a large one here, one there. I'm basically just going to provide some basic routes for AI to follow. They already have a pretty good idea of where they need to go. This is a pretty constricted map with the barriers that I've set up, so they're already going to be pretty choosy with their paths that they follow. I'll put one right there as well. And in my head right now, I'm kind of visualizing where I want to draw the connections, so it might look like just a random spattering of hubs, which in a sense it is, but there is a plan. Yeah, we'll leave it as that. Okay, so I'll make a new connection, and I'll just really quickly draw some connections here, and I'll maybe interconnect those. So as you can see by these ones here and by this little group right there, yeah, you can add as many connections as you want to a single hub. In fact, it is important that you add at least 2, which is why, I'll come back to this now, which is why I didn't do one big one here that just connected to this one in the bottleneck there. The game, for whatever reason, requires that you have hubs that have more than one connection. You will get crashes in your game if you have any hubs that are only connected in one direction. So that's why it's important just to have a second option. So by adding these 2 points here, this hub that's right next to the command post has 2 connections, well actually 3 I guess. And for example, this one here is also connected to this one and this one. So no problems there. And then of course this chain here, this hub has a connection here and here. So it follows the rule. And if you really want there to be a dead end in your map, such as this one, this is a really simple way to do it. Just make a really small triangle. You can even make it smaller if you want, if you really want it to look like a dead end rather than a cul-de-sac type of layout. That's what you can do. Alright, so I'm going to make a connection there. Maybe this way. This way. This way. This is just really rough. It's by no means intended to look really, really good. Oops. Just want some basic functionality. I'm all disoriented now. Okay, this way, maybe here. Okay, I think I am happy with that for now. Yep, everything looks good. One thing you may have noticed as I was placing this one is that there's a barrier right smack in the middle of this connection. That's okay. Mostly. I'm going to move the barrier just a little bit to give them a little room to walk around. They did have a little bit on this side to get past, but I'm going to be nice and I'm going to give them a little more space. Something like that. And if we go back to planning, you can see there's a little extra room there. Having barriers in the middle of your connections is actually a pretty good thing to do because it really mixes things up. So as it is right now, let's say this connection right here, what'll happen is units will be traveling more or less, not quite single file, but in a fairly straight line, just from here to here and then from here to here. They won't do a whole lot of zigzagging or weaving around things. So when I have this connection here with the rock and the barrier, they're actually going to start off traveling in a relatively straight line, and then they're going to swerve around it and then come back around. So it looks pretty good. And when you have a more complicated map with more props and more interesting features, this really starts to add a lot of life to your map and make the AI look almost intelligent. Okay, so yeah, we've got the connections all set up. I'm pretty happy with that. I want to head back over here and just set up some of those barriers that I had mentioned, because there is a chance that they will bump into the walls just a little bit. So I'll just add a few in, maybe there. Here, just so that they don't think that they can. Oops, what's going on here? I'm just going to delete that one. Yeah, I just don't want them to think that they can get through the wall. Again, for the most part, they will follow those connections pretty strictly. But adding these barriers does not hurt. By any stretch of the imagination. One thing to be careful of when you're placing barriers, let's say I didn't have those connections there. I want to be really careful with intersections like this. Now in my case, I do have just the tiniest little bit of overlap there, but if there's a hole, like this one, then the AI might try to get through there, and that looks terrible. What I'm going to do to fix this one, I could just add a little barrier in there. That's wasteful. So I'm going to go to the stretch tool for barriers, and it's a bit funny how these work, but I'm just going to left click on this barrier. You see this weird red almost crosshair type of thing comes up, and if you look really carefully you can see that the side that I'm closest to on the rectangle, that's the barrier, is highlighted in white. So I'm going to go here, and if you don't left click but right click while you're next to that side and then just drag the mouse, you can see a blue outline of the barrier appears and shows you where you're modifying that barrier by stretching it. So I could shorten it, or I could just make it a little longer so there's some overlap there, and just like that we're set. I'm just going to stretch this one out as well. Yeah, all the other ones have plenty of overlap. So I'll go back to creating new barriers. Okay, and whoops, one more here. Alright, and just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to turn on plans here. So planning, plans, you can see that now. Just to demonstrate this concept here with the boulder in a little more detail. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to create barrier there, there, and there. So they're going to try and go around those, but still stay relatively like within the arc of this connection. Alright, so I think that's a good start to that. We've got lighting, we've got some new barriers, we've got planning. Let's save. Whoops, save, yes. And close. We're going to go to build and munge. Deselect common and munge. Okay, it munged our props in there. Great. Close that. I'm just going to load up the preview here. Here's the example map. We'll go to Conquest. Let's do Galactic Civil War just for fun. Let it load. Alright. Spawn as the Empire. Cool. So now we can see the units are being very deliberate in where they're going. And if we look, you can see they're kind of following the zigzag path. So this, if you want to imagine, there's a barrier here, and then one here. Go around that. We don't have to care about that, but the AI does.
A command post has fallen to our enemies.
Okay. So now what I'm going to do is just kind of stand in here. This is very narrow. Wow. Didn't think it would be quite this narrow. But I'm just going to wait in here. Or maybe not right in there, but nearby. And just see how the whole capturing procedure works. Alright, so what I've done here, I've got one person to follow me in, and now that I've captured this command post, we're going to start seeing people spawning in here who will find their way out. So I just have to rethink things a little bit. Again, this is just a demonstration. Normally I wouldn't make something quite so tight and challenging to navigate, but as you can see, they're doing it no problems, and I'm not seeing too many units hitting walls. They seem to be figuring themselves out no problem. Very tight, very tight. Alright, now let's check out the lighting we added, because if you remember, we did add somewhere a spotlight. Hey, there it is. You can see the pink kind of glow. That would be from our spotlights. It gets a little more intense depending on where you are. Alright, so let's check out the Omni light, which should be right over there. You can kind of see the teal glow. We might not make it. Alright. Let's be something a little cooler. Yeah, the blue light is just a standard light that comes from Command Post, and it's something that I can talk about in a different tutorial. But let's just dash over here. Whoops. Hey. Unreal. Yeah, the Wookiee, as you can see, has some teal lighting on him. I'm just gonna do this. I am tired of dying. Invincible. Okay, just dash over there. Alright, so you can see the teal lighting effect here. That's from the Omni light. Pretty neat. And it gets a little less intense as you walk away from it, and a little more intense as you walk towards it. Which is pretty awesome. So there we have it. We've covered off some of the main points there, some of the more advanced functions in ZeroEditor. Now, one thing I just want to go back to now that we've looked at those lights. Let's go back to the lighting tab for the world. I don't really want either of those lights to stay in game. What I really want is the map to stop being so dim. And how I'm going to take care of that is place a new light. Select it. And I'm going to name it Directional Light 1. And we're going to change the type to Directional. As you can see, that works immediately. I'm just going to move it up. Again, location doesn't matter because the directional light is omnipresent. It comes from everywhere as long as it's facing the right direction. That's all that matters. So watch this. As soon as I rotate the light, let's rotate it. Whoa. If it's facing straight down, it's going to hit pretty much everything. If it's facing sideways like that, you can see it's almost as if the sun is changing positions in the sky. So that is definitely one of the neater effects in ZeroEditor, is being able to see that lighting change instantly. Alright, let's make it kind of twilight-ish in terms of the angle. So now I've got some pretty dramatic lighting. We've got lots of bright light from certain angles and some pretty intense, deep shadows. Cast shadows, yes, because we want to see our unit shadows show up. Specular, yes. And let's change the color. Make it just a nice sunny color. Let's make it feel like it's actually the middle of the day. So daylight tends to be, depending on the time of day, I guess we're going for dusk, so we'll make it kind of orangey. But not too orange. Just kind of a light, almost a skin color. Should be good. There we go. Alright, that looks pretty good. And really the only specific setting for directional light is this one here, which is bounding region. And what you can do is, if you go to the region editing mode and you create a new group, which is a new region, you can have the directional light limited to a certain region. So you could have theoretically 5 or 6 directional lights in different places, and bound to certain regions so that you get different lighting effects in those areas. But we're not going to do that. Now here's another thing that you want to note about directional lights, which is why I kind of came to this one last. There's a few more other settings here called global light settings. So these are important as well because they affect how objects are lit and just how the ambience of the map is going to look. So what we want to do here is enter the name of our main directional light. In our case it's called directional light -1. So now the global light settings for our world are going to be looking for the color and direction of that light, this one here. And then if we had a second one, we could definitely add that. We could maybe add, if it was say a map with lava, we could add a really dark red or orange light coming from below to show that intense lava glow on the bottom of characters and props. We don't, so we're just going to leave the one in there for now. And then we've got these two colors here, top ambient color and bottom ambient color. And when we pick a top ambient color, this is pretty much what's going to come up when an object is highlighted by the directional light. So let's maybe just make this a very dull but light skin tone. You can see things lighten up a little bit there. That's because we've changed that. We've added that new top ambient color to the mix. We could change it to something else, maybe pink, maybe really intense pink, and whoa. So this is that was a good idea actually for me to choose such an intense color, because this shows you what the top ambient color does. So you can see that the directional light still directly impacts this hill and highlights that side of the hill as well as this side of the hill. But everything else is now pink. That's because it's not being directly highlighted by the light. So if I select the light and just rotate it, you can see that wherever the light is directly hitting and highlighting, that's where that normal color comes back. And if you look at the rock, even sort of there, you can see that it does shift a little bit. And if we move it this way, you can see the same effect happens there. So I'm just going to move it back to right about there. And then the bottom ambient color is pretty similar, but it's the basically the color of your shadowed areas. So let's make that just to show you a really dark green. Kind of hard to tell with the pink, so I'm just going to change that back to the one that I actually want, which is kind of a light skin color. Okay, and green's a bad idea. Let's do like a blood red. Kind of difficult with this map because there's nothing really to look at in terms of really intense dark areas, but you can see that the lee side of these hills here have gotten darker and are just slightly tinged red. So let's change that to something that I'm actually going to want to use. A lot of times if you want some really stark contrast on your map, you would just make it black. I like to do a really dark gray with a little bit of color like that. Alright, so now that's looking a little better, a lot better. Now is that light going to be coming from the location that the sun is in the sky? I don't know. I'm not going to figure that out at this point. There's a really great sky and sun tutorial on Game Toast. Oh, and I'll just quickly look at this as well. Environment map name. Environment maps are what are used to generate reflections on certain types of units and objects that have that are really shiny. Yeah. So we're not going to look at that right now, but yeah, we'll just save and exit. Give the world a really quick munge. Okay, so I did make a bit of a mistake. I munged the wrong world when I went to munge right there, so the changes didn't show up in game. I'm just going to correct that right now and munge ABC, not my other map that I'm working on. Okay, here we are. It's munged. We will run the mod tool, and right at the end of this video I will show you how to get this mod tool application working. Alright, spawn as the CIS this time. And you can see that we've got some nice shadows going on now, and some good lighting. I was actually pretty close with the direction of the lighting. So the world looks a lot brighter now. A lot nicer. And you can see the rock is casting shadows. Whoa. Now the walls are not casting shadows. The reason for that is because they're a prop that I created just only for testing purposes, and they don't include what's called a shadow volume, which defines where an object's shadow is cast. So they've got shading. You can see this side is darker because it's facing away from the light, but they don't actually cast a shadow.
Our command post is under Confederacy control.
And again, that's all me. But the objects that do have shadow volumes, like this rock, cast a pretty nice shadow from the light. But that's okay, because that's pretty much all I needed to show at this point. Alright, so we've covered off more or less all you need to know in ZeroEditor to get you started. You can figure out some other things on your own. I guess this would be considered an intermediate ZeroEditor tutorial, and I may do an advanced one at some later time. Now, just before I finish up, I'll show you how to get that mod tool, mini Battlefront 2 sort of test version working. To do that, what you do is go to the main mod tools directory, and you can see this BF2 mod tools exe file in here. If I double click it, it gives me this error. The program can't start because BinkW32 is missing from your computer. Try reinstalling the program. That's because this program wasn't designed to be run out of this folder. It's meant to be run out of your Battlefront 2 directory. So I'm going to copy it from here and go to your Battlefront 2 installation folder. I've got a shortcut to mine, but you would go to Games, Star Wars Battlefront 2, and don't put it right in here, put it in Game Data. Just paste. I've already got mine in here, and if you run it from there, then it'll work no problem. So you can see it has been crippled. It's got the green overlay on the top half just to show where the console would go, and it's a very small size. It also has some locked settings that you can't change, so there are some limitations. You can't just play it as the actual game itself, but no, other than that, it's very useful for just doing some quick testing. It also outputs an error log called bfront2, and it's just a text file, and it'll show you some useful stuff that you can use while testing your maps. So that pretty much does it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any questions. Head on over to the GameToast.com forums if you want to see some more great tutorials or ask any questions about modding.